You're going down.
Kick his ass, Peter!
Yeah, kick his ass!
Punch his ass, Peter! You had enough?
There you go.
Russian-Ukraine tensions are at an all-time high. Well, except for the time they invaded Crimea in 2014, or the time they staged a mock invasion of Eastern Europe in 2017, or the time they threatened to nuke Europe in 2021. You know, besides all those other times, tensions were at all-time highs.
So, as you all have heard us say many times, we are concerned that the Russian government is preparing for an invasion in Ukraine that may result in widespread human rights violations and war crimes. We are now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine.
This all begs the question, what would a Russian-Ukraine war look like? Back in 2017, Russia conducted a series of military exercises known as Zapad, or Exercise West. With their roots in the Soviet Union, Zapad military exercises have traditionally been shows of force, meant to let NATO know that Russia was willing and ready to fight. Despite Russian claims that the 2017 Zapad exercises were only preparations for counter-terror operations, the exercises that were supposed to feature only 10,000 personnel turned into a 100,000-strong mock invasion of Eastern Europe, with one clear message: Russia's military might is back. After an embarrassing performance in the 2008 Georgian-Russian War, where Russian forces dwarfed Georgian ones 4-1, but still struggled to achieve key objectives, Russia dramatically modernized its armed forces. New T-90 tanks and Su-57 and MiG-35 aircraft dramatically improved its capabilities, both in the air and on the ground. On top of that, Russia's military has seen a huge increase in the size of its volunteer forces, which traditionally have much better performance and morale compared to conscripted army. An increase in heavy road transport units meant to carry tanks to the front lines has reduced Russia's reliance on rail transport, which would be a natural first target for NATO bombardment. Russia has also doubled down on one area that it's traditionally outperformed NATO in: ground-based anti-air platforms. The introduction of the S-400 and S-500 anti-air defense systems has given NATO warplanners serious concerns, and with a range of up to 250 miles or 600 kilometers, a single battery of S-500 units can threaten large swaths of a European battlefield. They were even allegedly successful in locking on to stealth F-35s in Syria. But what about the raw numbers? NATO maintains an active duty force of about 2 million personnel versus Russia's 1 million. NATO also has an air force of 13,000 fighter, strike, and bomber aircraft versus Russia's 3,900. It's on the ground where Russia might have an advantage, with over 20,000 tanks versus NATO's 10,000. One asterisk on those tanks: Russia still counts thousands of decommissioned Soviet-era tanks in its official figures that, even if they brought back into service, would be outclassed and outmatched by modern Abram tanks. NATO's Article 5 reads, "The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all."
The United States has demonstrated, not merely with words, but with its actions, that we stand firmly behind Article 5, the mutual defense commitment.
You might have noticed that Ukraine is not one of the 30 member states of NATO, but if Russia were to take Ukraine, it would put them within striking distance of the heart of Europe. Many NATO members, including the US, UK, France, Spain, and others, have mobilized forces in Ukraine to help counter the potential Russian invasion. Even if NATO itself doesn't join the conflict, 7 of the 10 strongest members of NATO have already committed to defending the country, and the Secretary General of NATO is leading the negotiations.
What we know is that we have seen a significant Russian military buildup with tens of thousands of combat-ready troops and heavy equipment.
Recent declassified US intelligence documents show Russia amassing 175,000 troops in hundreds of BTGs, or battalion tactical groups, in 4 locations along Ukraine's border. A successful invasion of Ukraine would need to quickly take the country and set up defensive positions, in essence, telling the West that a counter-invasion would cost far more lives than Ukraine is worth. Ukraine has 8 Air Force bases that would quickly be bombarded by hundreds of long-range missile systems, and a quick skirmish of naval nuclear submarines against Ukraine's navy in the Azov Sea would give Russia complete bombardment capabilities over Ukraine. From there, battalions near Persynovka would quickly move into the eastern provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, which are effectively already under the control of pro-Russian armed insurgents. These forces would meet with the forces from Crimea to take the area east of the Dnieper River. This section of Ukraine would be the easiest to control, as nearly half the population identifies culturally as Russian and speaks it as their native language. The flat plains of Eastern Europe would make defensive operations incredibly difficult, especially against large masses of Russian tanks. It was these same flat plains that saw some of World War II's largest tank battles, and we'll see them again should Russia launch World War III. As the battalions from Persynovka move west, any resistance they meet could be attacked from behind by the second staging area in Boyevo. Besides attacking Ukrainian forces from both sides, they could pinch off supply lines, leaving them isolated from reinforcements. After these first battles commence and the Ukrainian attention is diverted to the east, the first staging group near Yelena could make a beeline for the capital of Kiev. Because Russia has so many more troops than Ukraine, either Ukraine has to move forces from the capital to defend the eastern parts of the country, leaving the capital exposed, or if they want to devote their forces to protecting the capital, they would concede the eastern half of the country. Both a lose-lose strategy. From there, Russia would control the vast majority of Ukraine and could begin digging in their forces. One of their biggest difficulties in achieving this, especially before a NATO counteroffensive can be launched, will be urban conflict. While much of the terrain east of the Dnieper River includes rural fields and forests, there are several major urban areas that a Russian mechanized force would have to either take or bypass and besiege. Kiev has almost 3 million inhabitants, Kharkiv has roughly 1.5 million, and Odessa and Dnipro have 1 million. If defended, these large urban areas could take considerable time and casualties to clear and occupy. In the First Chechen War, it took Russian forces 40 days to wrestle control of Grozny, then a city of less than 400,000, from only a few thousand Chechen fighters. In the Second Chechen War, the re-siege of that same small city still took 6 weeks. The one bright side to an urban World War III is we might finally get some good battlefield maps. Russia could skip these urban areas at first and mop them up later, but Kharkiv is just over the border from Russia and is a major road and railroad junction. If Russian forces don't quickly take the city, it would seriously harm their logistical capabilities to support a push towards the Dnieper River and beyond. Keep in mind, we said this is how Russia's ideal invasion would go. In reality, it would be a far cry from this. Starting in the Black Sea, Russia's navy would be demolished. Russia has the second largest navy in the world, but only has a single aircraft carrier. And not only is it not stationed in the Black Sea near Ukraine, instead it's part of the Northern Fleet, it's undergoing modernization and isn't expected to return to service until 2023. Of their 2 largest Kirov battleships, both are part of the Northern Fleet as well, and one is also not expected to return to service until 2023. The Black Sea Fleet is made up of a single Slava cruiser, 2 Krivak frigates, 3 Grigorovich frigates, and 25 smaller frigates, most of which are less than 1,000 tons and more than 30 years old. Just as a size comparison, so you can understand how small those frigates are, on November 12th alone, the USS Mount Whitney and USS Porter arrived at the Black Sea port of Constanta and weighed a combined 28,000 tons, more than all of the 25 smaller frigates combined. Apart from just those 2 ships, US and NATO forces have dozens of more powerful and modern ships in the area. The USS Harry Truman Carrier Strike Group stationed in the Mediterranean is made up of an aircraft carrier carrying 50 planes, a cruiser, and 3 guided missile destroyers. This strike group of just 5 ships would beat out Russia's rather small Black Sea Fleet, and that's if Russia would even be willing to have a navy destined to be destroyed leave port. And Russia's air force wouldn't fare much better. The Su-57 is Russia's most advanced fighter, incorporating stealth technology and advanced avionics, but they're still in production and only have 3 ready for combat. The majority of Russia's fighter planes are MiG-29s and 31s and Su-27s, manufactured in the 1980s, and far worse than the dozens of F-35s stationed around Europe. Keep in mind that technology is far more important than numbers. In the Falkland War, British Harriers shot down 31 enemy aircraft with 0 losses due to enemy aircraft, so F-35s will dominate the skies in any European conflict. Besides firepower, many wars have come down to logistics, and whatever side has the best logistics capabilities often prevails in the end. As tensions mount, if an invasion began in February, it would have the advantage of frozen ground to support the cross-country movement of a large mechanized force. February is usually the coldest and snowiest month of the year in Ukraine, averaging just 10 hours of daylight each day. But if fighting is prolonged and continues into March, mechanized forces would have to deal with the infamous Rasputitsa, or thaw. In March, the frozen steppes of Ukraine thaw, and the land once again becomes at best a bog, and at worst a sea of mud. This would make a prolonged conflict a nightmare for Russia. There's a Russian expression, the first blini is always a mess. In invading Ukraine, Russia will be conducting its largest arms operation since the Battle of Berlin in 1945. The 2008 Russo-Georgian War we mentioned earlier saw just 5 days of combat and engaged only 70,000 Russian soldiers. About 120,000 Russian soldiers are mobilized near Ukraine, with tens of thousands more ready to deploy into combat. It will be a logistical challenge for Russian command to move all of these forces into their attack positions without the massive number of soldiers and vehicles moving on a limited number of muddy roads from becoming one giant traffic jam. Of course, this is assuming any conflict would only be using conventional arms and not nuclear ones. Do you think NATO should risk nuclear war to defend Ukraine? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you like this content, check out our video on what the future of warfare could look like. And remember, there's always more to learn.